Hey, everybody, it's good to see you all here in our newly designed, newly coiffed room 150 that I understand that they heard that Bruce was giving the talk today and the camera is broken. And so people will be able to see, hear him and see the slides, but not see Bruce live while he's talking. Thank you all for being here and welcome to the Gene Budig Teaching Professorship and Education Lecture. We do this every fall, and in the spring we do the Budig Lectureship in special education. We're proud that Dr. Bruce Frey from the Department of Ed Psychology will be sharing his thoughts with us this afternoon. Bruce is the latest of a distinguished list of our faculty members who joined the ranks, and he's joining the ranks of the Budig Teaching Professorship in the school. Always like to admit, I was reading the standard stuff that they give me, and I realized that many of you probably don't know who Gene Budig was. When you walk up and down Jayhawk Boulevard, you'll see on your right Budig Hall. That's Gene Budig. He was one of the longest sitting chancellors at the University of Kansas. He had been president at the University of West Virginia, and he left here and became the vice president of the American League in baseball. And he had a long, distinguished career. But while he was a chancellor here and afterwards, Gene had a great love for he actually had a doctorate, not from us, but in education, but he had a great love for teaching. And how many chancellors will create a professorship in teaching in any field? And he did it both in our field and in journalism and one other. So our thanks to the Budig family. Gene sadly passed away a few years ago. Bruce joined the KU School of Education in 1998. As an assistant professor in the Department of back then Psychology and Research and Education. Had a baccalaureate degree in film studies, and his PhD was in quantitative methods in ed psychology and research. Bruce is an award winner both for his teaching and scholarship over the years. His primary research includes classroom assessment and instrument development. He's authored about 100 research articles, papers, and books. He had a best-selling book called Statistics for People Who Think They Hate Statistics. He had a book on modern classroom assessment, which I think we still use in some of our classes. He had a book called There's a Stat for That, all published by Sage, and he had another one called Stat Hacks. Bruce consistently receives great evaluations for his teaching and has won a number of teaching awards over the years, both from undergraduates and graduate students. As of last count, and nobody's counting Bruce, he had served on approximately 491 dissertation committees, and that's all in the space of the last 2 years. Is that right? Yeah. Here are a couple of comments that we received from students. A simple, knowledgeable, professional way of teaching will let you understand well what is a statistic and how to use it and digest it. Another said he always will take the time out of his schedule to help students and always go above and beyond to make sure his teaching is accessible to all students. I don't think these comments do justice to the large number of comments that we got, but are pretty representative of the kinds of things that the students said. In addition, his colleagues talked about his approachability, how he often they seek his advice on their courses. Here's a couple of comments from his colleagues. My job interview, Bruce became aware of some of my personal nerdy special interests. Oh boy, right? When he found out I would be coming to KU, he took the time to find a small but meaningful gift related to those interests. Time and again, I've seen Bruce take the time to reach out to people in similar ways. Another colleague said that as a colleague for nearly 15 years, I'd rank him as one of our department's best instructors. I would add that I think we have many outstanding instructors. I've gone to him many, many times over the years for advice on my courses. So join me in welcoming Bruce, who in his spare time leads a secret life. He'll probably be opening his shirt so you can see his superstar outfit as Professor Bubblegum, host of Valley, a podcast that celebrates bubblegum pop music of the late 1960s. Apparently this is widely popular with young people. And just as a teaser, I'll let Bruce explain this later on. Bruce, Sugar, honey, honey.
Thank you. I've been at KU for a while in the school, and I've been here under 7 deans. And I'd like to thank the best dean we ever had. Fortunately, Karen Gallagher couldn't be with us this afternoon. I've waited 20 years to make a good Karen Gallagher reference. Thank you for that. I do want to thank Lisa for arranging for me to be able to do this today on this date. And John and Jeannie to make the arrangements so this all works. There are people watching on Zoom who, because there's not a camera in the room, can't see me, but my wife, who's here, has put her phone up here. She has zoomed in. So if you can hear my voice and you're watching on Zoom, look for the face that says Bruce, and you'll be able to at least sort of see me, I think, a little bit. It's a bit of a dilemma to have this opportunity to talk. I was very excited to win the award. And then as I started to think about how I should fill this time, it began to worry me. I've seen a lot of these Budig lectures over the years, and there's those of you that have, there's kind of several different approaches. Sometimes people talk about their teaching and their pedagogical philosophy. Sometimes people talk about their research. Sometimes their research is about teaching and they talk about those things. Sometimes folks will spend the time to share with us their hobbies and the things they do for fun and turn that into some metaphor that has to do with life and being a college professor. And so I started to think about my identity as a college professor, as someone who teaches college. And I started to think of what's the narrative that actually describes that well, that I could cover in 45, well now 38 minutes. And I realized there's really several different narratives, several different stories that I can put around the same event. So the strategy I'm going to follow today is to use 3 different stories to talk about how I got from the beginning, whenever that was, to here as a full professor in the School of Education. And the 3 stories will be a linear, what's called a happenstance story, and then the one I will enjoy and you will not, the heroic journey of my life. Now, my counseling psych friends tell me that if you talk to someone late in their career and you say, how did you happen to get here? They'll have a story they can tell. They will have a straightforward linear story about, well, I did this and then I chose this and then I planned for this. And they'll have a story about how they got there, but it won't be true. The research suggests that the actual story is based on chance and luck and people they happen to know at the right time. It's all based on happenstance. So I'll have a linear story, I'll have a happenstance story, and then I'll have that heroic journey. So the linear story is there's some sort of start and then the goal is reached. And in my case, there was some sort of beginning and then I end up as some wildly beloved professor. So let's start with that straightforward story. Adolescence. I went to school in Topeka, Kansas, Randolph Elementary, Boswell Junior High, Topeka High School. I was pretty good at, I had verbal and math skills. As a person, I wanted to be a good kid. I wanted to help people. I'm sure this was because my father who was a social worker at the Miniger Foundation, said that we should help people. His advice was if someone asks for help, you should give it to them. When I was in high school, I saw a movie, Ordinary People. Man, I love this movie. It was about a troubled adolescent boy who goes to see a psychiatrist and the psychiatrist helps him. And I really wanted to be that psychiatrist.
I need something. What do you need? Tell me. It just keeps coming. I can't make it stop. Don't cry. I gotta go off the hook. I gotta get off the hook. For what? For what I did. What did you do? What I did to him. What did you do? It's something. Don't you see? It's gotta be somebody's fault, but there ain't no goddamn fight. It happened. No, it ain't. I don't mean that. It's Bucky, I didn't mean it. Bucky, I didn't mean it. Bucky. I know that. It wasn't your fault. But it was. You could get the cell down. Then I couldn't. It jammed. And then the halyard jammed and I got it. Jammed. And then you spun around until you had to do anything. Take care of it. And that wasn't fair, was it? No. And then you say, hang on. And then you let go. Why'd you let go? Because I got tired. Yeah. Happened. What?
Then I got a movie camera for Christmas. And I decided, well, I won't be a psychologist. I'll make movies, but I'll make movies like ordinary people. I live near KU, so I went to KU and I majored in film studies. Got a degree in film studies. While I was here in film studies, I was the critic for the University Daily Kansan. And then when I got that degree, I realized now's the opportunity to be a psychologist. So I entered the school psychology program here at KU. About halfway through, I switched. Oh, these were my faculty back in the school psych days when I was here. I switched to quantitative methods, research methods, REMS, we call it. I could still be a educational psychologist, still do things to help people. Got that degree. Nona Tollefson was my advisor back then. The great Nona Tollefson. After I got my degree, my first job out of school was here in Lawrence at a place called DECA, whereas I was a statistician and director of evaluation for them. It was a grant-funded position. That grant ended, so my next job was at KU Med, where I was a senior research associate. I helped primary care faculty get published. During that time, there was an opening for what back then they called visiting assistant professor. Now we would call it something like a long-term lecturer or maybe a teaching professor. And I was recruited to come here full-time, did it for 3 years teaching classes in the program, in the department. Then there was an opening for assistant professor with a tenure track position. I applied for that, got that, eventually got promoted and tenure associate, and then became a full professor and am wildly beloved. Often in these Budig lectures, and I'll do it here, people talk about their research because you got to do that research to get those promotions. Early on, I did research in classroom assessment. Then I began to develop instruments that other researchers could use. Then I began to write textbooks. And more recently, I now edit encyclopedias. So that's my linear story in terms of being an academic person who publishes scholarship. That's story number one. Story number two, the happenstance story. None of these three stories, by the way, are true, but all three of them are true. This one's most likely to be true of the three, I think. Under the happenstance model of career development, you start somewhere and then a bunch of random stuff happens and you end up somewhere. It's the same events as the self-determination story, but it's a different interpretation. I'm going to frame it differently. So 6 months old, we moved to Topeka so that my dad can work as a social worker at the Menninger Foundation in Topeka. That happens to be near the University of Kansas. Menninger Foundation could have been anywhere. We could have moved anywhere. We moved to Topeka. I did get that movie camera for Christmas. I did love the movie Ordinary People. The truth is, though, that I identified more with the troubled adolescent kid who wondered what his purpose was, what the meaning of life was. I did get that film studies degree while I was here. For that, I made movies. Find some of them on YouTube under my name. But a lot happened before I came back to school as a school psychologist student. For years, turns out, by the way, there is this degree of film studies not attached to any sort of job or career that you can get. No major movie studios here in the area and so on. So I had just sort of regular jobs. Among the big jobs I had during that time was I was a manager of a video store. The senior faculty here, if you would explain to the junior faculty what videotape was, that would be good. And then for about 1.5 years, I was a DJ at a radio station. So if the junior faculty would explain to the students what radio was, this would be a good thing to do. But I had a friend at that time named Angela Worrell. She was studying to be a school psychologist here. And I thought school psychology, they give IQ tests. I love tests. I love knowing the answers. And they also probably do therapy with adolescents. Probably, I don't know. I still don't know exactly what a school psychologist does. But I applied to the school psychology program. Nona Tollefson was my advisor. I then switched to REMS. Nona Tollefson remained my advisor then. I got that job right out of school at DECA here in Lawrence. I got that job, and by the way, the pattern in this story is that there were people that happened to like me and happened to be here and happened to help me. There was a job in a grant as a statistician that was written for Sam Green by DECA, and they tried to recruit him from KU, from our department, to go have that job. He said, no, thank you, but he recommended me, and that's how I ended up at DECA. Then when I was at the KU School of Medicine, one of the people I happened to work with was a physician named Timothy Dahlman, and he wanted to create scales to measure stuff. So I started doing that and learning how to do that. And it's because of him I got like a real life journal publication. Then I took that visiting assistant professor opportunity here in our department. And then there was an opening for assistant professor. And this was a little more complicated. Sam Green, who was department chair at the time, I think he liked me, came and talked with me and said, I like you, but you're not ever going to be a world-class researcher. So I see that you're interested in applying for this tenure track position, and I like you. Did I mention that? But I'm not going to be supportive of that. I thanked him for his honesty, and I said, look, if I want to be a professor here, this is the only way it's going to happen. So I understand your position, but I've got to apply anyway. And I think that actually sort of impressed him. As luck or chance or happenstance would have it, he left the University of Kansas and we got a new department chair, Tom Creshaw, right at about that same time. Tom didn't have the opinion that I wouldn't be welcomed as a tenure track professor. So I got that job, went on to become an associate professor and then a full professor, wildly beloved. My publications that got me those promotions, I haven't published a single journal article where I'm the only name on. I collaborated with other people. One thing that means is I got help from lots of other people. I published with all these people, some of whom are in this room right now. Oh, and I'll add Sean Smith too. I'll put him there at the end, not because he was particularly important, but in his Budig lecture, he waited 40 minutes to mention my name. 40 minutes. It's more complicated than this. Here's a big secret. I was not a good college student. I looked up my undergraduate GPA in the system the other day. 2.57. You can get a college degree with a GPA of 2.57. It didn't occur to me that the GPA would matter. I wasn't going to go to graduate school. And then once I was in graduate school, I still wasn't a very good student. But can you imagine Nona Tollefson, me applying to school psychology with that 2.57 GPA? And she called me into her office and she explained that the GPA of 2.57 was unusually low for an applicant. She probably demonstrated the normal curve as she was saying that. But she said, but your test scores are quite impressive. The one skill I've always had is to do well on multiple choice tests. That was lucky. She said, your test scores are very impressive, so we're going to let you into the school psych program, but it's going to be under double secret probation. Here are 4 courses. You have to get A's in those or else you're out. So I started the school psych program. About a year and a half in the practicum course, at the end of that, Steve Lee, who was the director of training, called me in and explained that I had flunked out of school psychology. I walked to Nona Tollison's office and told her that, and she said, oh, well, that's too bad. Hey, you know what? The stuff you really like that you get A's in, research design, statistics, measurement, just go ahead and get a PhD in that. Forget your EDS in school psych. Get an R program and get a PhD. So I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. An important meeting during that time as a graduate student was becoming friends with Neil Salkind. He called me up on the phone one day. I didn't know him. And he said, Bruce, this is Neil Salkind. And I said, oh, hello, nice to meet you. And he said, Bruce, are you smart? I said, yes. And so I became his research assistant for years. I would help him with whatever his projects were. And his projects back then were books about Macintosh computers, best-selling books. So I assisted him on writing books, and that paid off later, of course, right? And then years, by the way, he used to list this on his annual review as a publication of the book. Good old Neil. Years later, he said, Bruce, he'd become kind of an agent by this time. I need someone to write a book about eBay, about online auctions. You know, you collect comic books, you know about eBay. Can you write that book? And I said, sure. So I wrote this book. I do not list this on my Vita. It's this book, by the way, that Neil Kingston uses to say that all my books have monkeys on the cover. Only this book has a monkey on the cover. But I had published a book with a publisher. Once you do that, it's so much easier to get a proposal accepted for another book. So none of this would have happened, right, if I hadn't written this book. And I wouldn't have been asked to write this book if I hadn't helped Neil and if I hadn't said yes in that phone call. So becoming a visiting assistant professor, that was thanks to Sam Green. Moving ahead in the life of a professor, that was thanks to Nona Tollefson, who was my mentor, and then Tom Krieshock later was my mentor. So that's the chance story. And now the good one that allowed me to use photos from comic books and stuff. This will be so fun for me. This is all based on Joseph Campbell's stuff about the hero's journey. We all know in classic tales of legends and myths and all of that stuff, there are hero's journey stories, and they have a lot of important steps to them. We're going to cover those 5 steps. Okay, we'll start with my origin, who I am and how I came to be. Now, as a hero in this story, I'm going to assume that I am concerned about social justice and helping people when they ask for it. And so that means the story begins with my grandfather, Donald Frey Sr., who was a prominent attorney in the Chicago area in the 50s and 60s and was a civil rights leader. He worked to make fair housing laws in Chicago. He would meet with other civil rights leaders. They would work together. He would get laws passed. And so this is Donald Frey Sr. I don't know who that other guy is next. But how cool is that? My father, Donald Frey Jr., also cared about civil rights and helping people and servicing the disenfranchised population. So he moved to Topeka, where the Menninger Foundation had a community service outreach program that helped those populations. This was Topeka, Kansas, which in some ways was the center of the civil rights movement. We literally moved there, 5 years after Brown versus the Board of Education in Topeka. Throughout the 60s and 70s, there were still protests, riots. There was violence in Topeka during that time. My mother was part of the Kansas foster care program. We would have for maybe a day at a time, a baby staying with us while other things were being worked out. And those babies were white or black or Hispanic. We had 40 or 50, I had 40 or 50 brothers and sisters during that time. And my mom tells the story of her and I and a black baby we were taking care of in the grocery cart in a grocery store. And a woman coming up to my mom and spitting on her and calling her a tramp. Another important part of a hero's origin story is to survive some great natural disaster. And in Topeka in 1966, the June 8th tornado happened. At the time, it was the biggest tornado in US history. It went right down the center of Topeka, about a mile wide. Thousands of people lost their homes in the June 8th, 1966 Topeka tornado. That dot there is our house. Just missed us. That was lucky or heroic. A lot of heroes get advice from their parents. My father gave me two great pieces of advice. First was to treat every other human being with unconditional positive regard. You may know, those of you that are psychology types, that's the great Carl Rogers philosophy and advice on how to treat a client. Assume that other human beings are good and worthy of your respect. The other bit of advice when I was a little older was take a little shit and don't personalize. This became handy advice later in our story. So one great piece of a story about being a hero is you have to accept the call. You have to say yes. And throughout my career, I have said yes almost every time I've been asked to do something. Right? I applied to the school psych program. I said yes to that double secret probation. I said yes to teaching child development courses while I was in graduate school. I said yes to switching over to a PhD in research methods. I said yes to Neil Salkind when he asked if you're smart. If someone asks you if you were smart, you should say yes. I said yes to the DECA job. I said yes to the KUMC job. I said yes to being an adjunct while I had those jobs. I said yes to the KU job. I've said yes to almost every student committee I've been asked to serve on. I'm not going to serve on any of yours, but up to this point, and I've said yes almost every time I've been asked to collaborate on research. I've said yes to all these people. And they've said yes to me. Now, heroes have to face obstacles. And this has been a tough part of the speech for me to decide what to say here. Because I faced obstacles. Though I was welcomed and beloved by almost everyone in the school, there was one person, maybe two or three, but no, it was really one person who didn't want me here, let me know it, didn't think I was worthy.
Hi.
Hi, everyone on Zoom. Be sure to push mute on your Zoom screen there.
I'm gonna be with my.
There's a mute right here.
My son in Springfield.
This was my big moment too. Did you sense that I was about
And then I'll head
to
over.
pretend to get emotional?
Okay, yeah. And
All right, so let's back up. There was this tornado in 1966. There was someone who didn't think I was worthy of being here, didn't give me respect, didn't think that I deserved to be here. One reason it's hard to know how much or what to say at this point is that overwhelmingly I was made to feel. This guy, though, thought that I shouldn't be around, that I didn't belong. But all these people did. And there's 50 other people that I just can't find photos.
that was fine. I can sleep.
And especially these three on the left here.
No worries.
My mentors while I was
We're
here.
too-
The community does an
We've been
outstanding
friends for
job
too
of
long. Don't worry about it.
here.
Don't
I
worry.
can only find a couple pictures of Nona. I've shown this one like half a dozen times. I'm going to switch to the other one, which I think she would like. a lot of you agreed that I was a good player and that I belong on this team. Same as one person didn't. But I survived that obstacle because of this advice. He didn't think I belonged here. He didn't think I was worthy. Turned out he didn't think anyone was worthy of being here. So I just tried not to personalize that. There was an incident, a moment that actually helped make me feel like I belong. I was teaching a class and most of my classes were in the evening or even at night. And at the end of one of those classes, a student came up to me, middle-aged Hispanic man. He had taken other courses here in the school, and he tried to explain to me a feeling he had that for the first time, he could tell that I respected him. He hadn't gotten that feeling from people before, but he could tell that I respected him and didn't somehow expect less of him. And this is true. Well, they're all true stories. After my talk with him, I went out to my car in the back parking lot there. And I literally danced around the parking lot because I knew I belonged, and I knew it doesn't matter what that guy wants. I'm going to get tenure. I'm going to be here the rest of my life. So often in these hero tales, the hero makes a pledge. So when I was assistant professor, I met Jennifer Ng and we became friends. We were both untenured assistant professors. And we were very observant, thoughtful people, and we looked around the school. And we noticed that the senior faculty, well, let's just say that if we did a word cloud on our impressions of the senior faculty, oh, here's our superhero versions, Jennifer and I. If we did a word cloud, it would look like this. This was decades ago. Okay. It didn't seem like senior faculty were supportive of junior faculty. It seemed like they were competitive. It seemed like they didn't want to collaborate. They were territorial. They would gossip about other faculty and how the research they did wasn't any good. One of us, our assistant professors at the time in our cohort, went to their advisor and said, "I've written this article. Will you look it over and give me feedback?" And he said, "Sure, if you make me co-author." So there, we perceived that this is how senior faculty were, and we thought maybe everyone starts out like us, but by the time you get to be a senior professor, you've changed. So we vowed never to change. We literally wrote a pledge. Here's what we wrote. I promise to respect the contributions, perspectives, and scholarly work of my colleagues. I may disagree with my colleagues, but I will treat them with respect. I promise to be student-centered in all my professional activities. Student-centered means that I am committed to students' educational needs, interests, and well-being. We took that pledge, we put it on a piece of parchment paper, we sent it through a printer, and we signed it in 2006. At that time, in 2006, there were 19 untenured assistant professors in the School of Education. We talked to all of them. They signed the pledge. We kind of formed a secret Justice Society of America. We pledged to respect our colleagues and be student-centered. I really don't want to show you this next slide. Here's who's here now. From our cohort in 2006, this was what we were able to retain. Now, I know, I mean, this is my hero story, right? But I know this isn't my fault. I know it's our fault. By the way, half of these people are KU grads from the same programs they now teach in. We often don't want to hire our own, but if we're interested in retention, we might think about it. Now, heroes in these stories sometimes fail and they sometimes succeed. Let's start with the successes. Remember the pledge, being respectful of other faculty and being student-centered. In terms of respecting other faculty, I have published articles with 77 faculty and students in the School of Education. That's good. I've sat on more than 500 doctoral committees. That's good. That's a reason to celebrate. Let's talk about the failures. This was the other part of the speech that was hard to figure out what to say here, because when I was Bruce, the young assistant professor, I would see injustice in the system. And it would make me so angry. I took ownership of every injustice to a colleague that I saw. My father, whenever he was going to give a speech, would often make a joke that I will begin with a list of people I've never liked. And back then, young Bruce, the assistant professor, literally had a list of all the wrongs that he had seen. Now, that was some time ago. Back then, every injustice was a 10 on a 1 to 10 scale in my mind. And some of these injustices over the passing of time, as I get older and wiser, there's apparently different perspectives on things. People see the world differently. A lot of that list of wrongs has gotten smaller. But I got to honor young Bruce. So I'm going to share 2 stories of injustice that to this day I think were in fact unfair to my colleagues. And they have to do with the promotion and tenure system. Remember a couple of things. One, this is in different departments. It's many, many years ago. Assistant Professor Lois goes up for promotion, has 12 publications. That's plenty. If you don't think 12 is plenty, that wasn't the real number. Whatever number you think is enough, put that there. School Personnel Committee and Department Committee overwhelmingly supported this person for tenure. Department chair did not, though. The reason the department chair caved for not supporting Lois was everyone knows that what she calls major doesn't count as major. Lois was in a program that had a category of major publication defined in the department and school written policy. That was unique to this particular program that Lois was in. It was in writing that it was major publications. On annual reviews, Lois would get 4 points for a major publication from this same department chair, who now said it was not major. So the ultimate outcome was that she was counseled to withdraw. And this was the right advice. And this advice came from a place of caring. But it was wrong. Assistant Professor Clark. And again, I want to remind you, this was decades ago. Well, 15 years ago. And in a variety of departments that I knew people, even in other schools. Assistant Professor Clark had 12 publications of whatever you think is enough had strong, overwhelming support from the school personnel committee, did not have support from the chair, because everyone knows that peer-reviewed articles have to be in top-tier journals. Everyone knows that they can't just be a certain number of peer-reviewed journal articles, they have to be in the top journals. Well, I don't know that. No one knows that. That's not in written policy. Not everyone is above average just to get tenure. So the ultimate outcome again was, and from a place of caring, the person was counseled to withdraw from their request for promotion and tenure. And in both of these situations, there was strong support from the school committee, but not support from the chair. The school committee read the chair's letter and arguments and dismissed it by turning to written policy. And I mean, I don't know what lesson to learn from this, except that in the system, each step, there's 6 steps in the promotion and tenure system, except for maybe the final step, the provost, they should all be essentially equal weight. Now, maybe it's reasonable to say that the chair's opinion should outweigh the department committee's opinion. Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't say that, but that's not crazy. But the opinion of a chair should outweigh the thoughtful opinion of the school committee. I don't know. But when those two things happened, I started a different hero story. Sometimes the hero rejects the call. And I withdrew a lot. Those of you that were in administration at that time might have noticed I stopped going to school assemblies. I stopped serving on administrative committees. I stopped making my colleagues' successes somehow my responsibility. But that damn pledge, Jennifer Ng, eventually I returned to being an active member of the community and to this day try to be a hero in my daily life and all of that. So those are 3 stories, right? A linear one, which probably isn't true, a happenstance one involving chance, and a hero's journey. There's actually a 4th one here we can look at, and this is a narrative given to me just recently. I was on the cover of a magazine, Kansas Alumni. The author of this magazine found out that I liked bubblegum music. Bubblegum music is from the late 60s. It was music written for 11-year-old girls that was not sophisticated, but very catchy. It was often sung by fictional cartoon characters or fictional bands like the Monkees and Partridge Family and the Brady Bunch and stuff like that. I like that, and I have a podcast about bubblegum music that's wildly popular with the young people.
Baby does the hanky panky. She got the way to move it.
If Rick hadn't used up all my time, we would have seen another 5 minutes of that. And so this magazine article initially was supposed to be about the fact that I had this mentor, Neil Salkind, and that he had arranged for me to take over his books, and it was going to be about that. But then when the guy interviewed me, he discovered about this podcast and that I like comic books, and he ended up making the article about, hey, here's this respected statistics professor who secretly likes bubblegum music. Do his students know? The article, when it came out, had this narrative in it, partly due to my wife Bonnie's suggestion, that there was this theme of mentorship, both in my professional life and in this podcast I do. Bonnie writes, Echo Valley is representative of her husband's values, kind-hearted, easygoing, avoids taking himself too seriously, a bit of a ham. and some other stuff, and then points out that in the Echo Valley show, it's really the story about Professor Bubblegum and his mentee, Kid Bubblegum, who he takes through the ups and downs and angst of his teenage years. So this narrative says that my life as a professional college teacher type is really one about mentors that I've had, people I have mentored. And so that's a fourth narrative that I'd like to include here as we think about what the best stories are for how I got here. And since we're talking about admiring and respecting other people, I want to take a chance here a second to mention two people in the school that I admire. The first is Neil Kingston. Here's his superhero picture. Speaking of social justice, most of us here talk the talk, and maybe we walk the walk. But Neil Kingston is truly an ally. He's actively anti-racist. He doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. And the other person in the school that I want to mention is Trissy Lowe in school psychology. She and I came into the department at the same time. We became assistant professors at the same time. We became full professors at about the same time. And she is a better scholar than I am, and she is a better teacher than I am, and I admire her. So those are the four stories we can talk about. Now, in theory, the story is not over yet. I haven't retired. I'm still here being this awesome hero that I am. So, what we're told is it's not about the ending of the story, right? It's about the journey. It's not the end of the journey that matters, it's the journey itself, right? Oh, by the way, did you know that Superman went to KU? Look at that. So if it's the journey, what has the journey been like in each of these four stories? Well, the Professor Bubblegum story is that it's been so much fun along the way. The hero story is that I've fought some battles along the way. The happenstance story is I've been so lucky along the way. And the straight line story is that I planned it every step of the way. Now, which of these is the most true? Well, as I stand here as a 49-year-old college professor, it's these two narratives that I think really are the most accurate. I've been so lucky to be a college teacher. It's been so much fun. How lucky are we? What could be better than being a college teacher? Now, before I finish, I want to mention a few more people. One, there are three people that helped shape the talk I gave today. One is my mom, who you may have noticed is listening somewhere in Kingman, Arizona. She's figuring out Zoom. She got the other people there in the home to also try to Zoom in, and they're listening or watching this right now. So she's responsible. I knew I had to make this somewhat interesting because she was listening. My wife, Bonnie, she let me practice in front of her, and she said, that seems fine. Just don't make it one of those, oh, how lucky are we to get to do what we love and get paid for it. We do it for free. So I cut out the we do it for free part. And then Jennifer Ng, whose advice was, Bruce, for God's sakes, promise me you're not going to read that list of wrongs that you've kept for 15 years. I need to apologize for people I had to leave out. There are research faculty here in the building, four in particular I'm thinking of, that are good friends and are so smart and so helpful and such great collaborators, and I don't have the time. Oh, yeah, I do. Patty Noonan, Amy Gomer Erickson, Amber Rowland, Gail Tiemann. If you get an opportunity to work with these people, you should. And the other people I had to leave out are all the graduate students that I worked with over these years. And I'm not showing them because I don't have time. It's really because I've never really cared for it. Thank you. Now I'll be glad to answer any questions people have. Yeah, I didn't think so. Thanks for coming. No, not really. We got awesome. We've got. Can't hear you. Mute, mute, get off the phone. Who's this, Bruce Frey? Oh, a friend of mine says it's a chimpanzee, not a monkey. It's Neil that calls it a monkey. I know it's an ape. Thank you. All right. But again, finally, thanks everyone. This was not nearly as bad as I was afraid it was going to be, and I appreciate it.
And now, the Riverdale Carnival presents the art.
Yes, sir.
Somebody's starting out.
Just that, we have a mentorship program here. Find a mentor, not just for how to publish, but for the social aspects of the school, how to teach, who to be friends with, who to avoid, how to mature and grow as part of the social community here, the school, because that turns out to be so much more important than you think it would be. I would certainly recommend they come here though, because we